The house was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The kind that feels wrong. The kind that makes you stop what you're doing, because deep down, your instincts are screaming that something is nearby. Tonight's stories come from people who experienced things they still can't explain. A man standing in a bedroom window of an empty house. A voice knocking at a door, using the voice of someone who wasn't even there. A shadow that walked through a hallway in the middle of the night. And something with scales, watching from outside a kitchen window. So before we begin, lock your doors, turn off the lights, and tell me, how brave are you really when the house goes quiet? Because tonight, you're going to experience terror in the darkness with me.
My name is Elena. I'm from Argentina, and I wanted to tell you my story, the story of the man in my room. When I was around 13 or 14 years old, my older sister moved out of the house. Her bedroom was much larger than mine, so as soon as I had the chance, I moved all my things in my bed into her room. From the very first day, I felt uncomfortable there. I would wake up constantly in the middle of the night with the sensation that someone was watching me. At first, it was only that feeling, or at least that's what I told myself. I should probably mention that strange things had always happened in my house. We were used to hearing sounds coming from the kitchen late at night, but nothing serious enough to truly scare us. One day, while cleaning what had become my new bedroom, I suddenly noticed a very strong smell of men's cologne. The scent was actually pleasant. It wasn't disgusting or rotten or anything like that, but the only people home were my mother and me. At first, after noticing the fragrance, I brushed it off. I thought maybe my mom had accidentally knocked over one of my dad's old colognes while cleaning, and the smell drifted into my room through the air. In my mind, that made sense. But the same thing kept happening again, and again, and again. Eventually, I ran out of logical explanations and simply got used to smelling that cologne whenever I was alone in the room. What disturbed me most was that nobody else could smell it. Whenever I tried to explain it to my mother, she'd give me a strange look and tell me I was imagining things.
After a while, the strange occurrences began changing. Still, I always tried to find some explanation that would make sense of what I was experiencing. One night, around 2 in the morning, I was watching TV while browsing on my computer. The only light in the room came from the screens. That's when I heard the door handle slowly turning. At first, I thought it was my mother coming to tell me to shut everything off and go to sleep already. But no. The door slowly opened halfway. "Yeah?" I asked. No answer. I got up and checked the hallway. Nobody was there. The stairs were empty, and every other bedroom door in the house was closed. I got scared, closed the door, and turned on the light. I sat back down at the computer, but I couldn't calm down. I checked the door again. Maybe I didn't close it properly, I thought. Maybe a draft pushed it open. But honestly, the fear wouldn't leave me. Eventually, I turned off the computer and the light, left the television on, and fell asleep. One weekend, my family and I went out to celebrate a birthday at my aunt's house. Now, every Saturday, a woman would come by our home because we donated clothes for her to resell. That particular Saturday, my mom forgot to tell her we wouldn't be home, so the woman showed up anyway. We didn't find out until Sunday when she called my mother. She explained that she had gone to the house and shouted through the front gate. My mother immediately apologized for forgetting to warn her nobody would be home. But the woman went silent for a few seconds, sounding confused. Then she said something that made all of us freeze. She told my mother that there had been someone home, an older man with white hair.
According to her, he had stood silently by the upstairs window, staring at her while she called from outside. He never waved, never spoke. He just watched her. She even tried waving her arm to get his attention, hoping he would hand her the bags of clothes we had left prepared for her. When my mother told us this, we all looked at each other in confusion. The woman was completely convinced she had seen that man. Terrified, I immediately insisted it had to be an intruder. Maybe someone had broken into the house. There were only 2 windows in the house that faced the street. Both of them belonged to my bedroom. When we arrived home, everything was untouched. The house was empty. I have a dog named Tura. She slept in my room with me, and her little bed was in one corner near the door. One night, sometime before dawn, I woke up because I heard her growling. Half asleep, I muttered, "Tura, stop it, go to sleep." But she kept growling, louder this time. "Tura, enough," I insisted. That behavior was completely unlike her. She was the kind of dog that slept peacefully all night until morning. I turned on the light. She was completely stiff on her bed, growling at the corner behind the door. Then I saw it.
Something or someone shoved her bed violently backward. The bed rolled across the floor and flipped over. That's when Tora exploded into frantic barking. She barked at absolutely nothing while I sat frozen in bed, barely awake, terrified and unable to understand what I had just seen. After several seconds, I finally reacted. I grabbed her and tried calming her down. I stood in front of her, petting her, while saying, "It's okay, there's nothing there." But she kept growling toward that corner. Between my legs, she tried pushing forward, desperate to keep staring at whatever was there. Eventually, I moved her bed beside mine. She finally laid down, but she never took her eyes off that corner. Neither did I. That was the first night I couldn't bring myself to turn off the light. One day, my sister and I were talking. We had always loved paranormal topics, so I finally asked her, "Did you ever feel anything strange in that room?" "Like what?" she asked. "Forget it," I said quickly. "It's stupid." I thought she'd laugh at me or call me crazy like my mom did. But her response made my blood run cold. She looked at me and asked, "Have you felt someone watching you from the corner behind the door yet?" I got chills instantly. For the first time, I finally felt safe enough to tell someone everything. The nights waking up terrified, the door opening on its own, the smell of cologne, the old man people claimed to see in the window, friends telling me they saw shadows passing by the curtains when I wasn't home, whispers saying my name directly into my ear, even screams in the early mornings. My sister understood completely. Then she told me something even worse. "I know his name." The moment she said it, my stomach dropped. "I knew it as soon as I moved into that room," she said quietly. "Maybe it's his energy. I've even dreamed about him." Then she added something that terrified me even more. "He doesn't like dogs."
I'm 28 years old now. I'm married, and I have a daughter. My husband never believed in paranormal things until he slept in that room. One night, I stayed in another room with my daughter because she was very sick. The next morning, my husband asked me something that made my skin crawl. "Who kept opening the bedroom door during the night?" My name is Nikki. This is the first time I've ever shared these experiences, and honestly, they caused a lot of fear for both my family and me. To begin, I should mention that I live with my mother, my 7-year-old brother, and my cousin Damien, who is already 22. My father used to live with us, but he had to leave the country for work, and that detail is important later. After my father left, my cousin moved in with us because my mother felt safer having another man in the house. We live in a small town in southern Mexico, one of those places most people have never heard of. In my neighborhood, stories about paranormal things are common. People always say things like, "La Llorona passes through here," and similar stories. Unlike my mother, I've always believed in the supernatural. One morning, I woke up at around 4 in the morning because I had school.
Classes started at 5:40 a.m., and I always took forever getting ready, so waking up early was normal for me. Still half asleep, I left the room where I slept with my mom and little brother. Ever since my father left, my mom hated sleeping alone and always said she felt safer if I stayed with her. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I felt a sudden chill. It was strange because the air outside the bedroom felt colder than inside, even though we had the AC running. I ignored it and walked into my own room to grab my towel. I should explain that my room had a large window covered only by metal bars and thick curtains.
From the moment I left my mother's room, I already felt this horrible, cold atmosphere around me. But I tried not to think about it. I went into the bathroom, shut the door, and started showering. When I finished, I rushed back to my room, closed the door, and started drying myself while getting dressed. As I was putting on my skirt, someone knocked softly on the door. Immediately, my body tensed. I hadn't heard my mother's bedroom door open, and that door always made an awful noise whenever it moved, so I knew it probably wasn't my mom or my little brother. After a few seconds of silence, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Then the knocking came again, this time harder. Fear started creeping into me. I slowly backed away from the door. That's when I heard a voice that made my entire body go cold. It was my father's voice. Exactly his voice. He begged me to open the door and let him in. But that was impossible. Like I told you before, my father wasn't even in the country. The knocking became more violent. My panic grew worse and worse. I started crying. I didn't know what else to do except pray. Shaking uncontrollably, I grabbed my rosary and Bible while the banging continued. Now it sounded like something was trying to break the lock. With every ounce of strength I had, I began praying out loud, clutching the Bible against my chest while begging God to protect me from whatever wanted to hurt me.
After what felt like the longest half hour of my life, the knocking finally stopped. The air felt calm again. I collapsed onto the floor, drenched in sweat and still gripping my rosary tightly. Eventually, after calming down a little, I stood up and carefully opened the door while whispering another prayer. The door was covered in scratches. Long claw marks stretched almost from top to bottom. I never found out what that thing was, but when I told my grandmother later that day, she said something I'll never forget. That was the one calling you to go with him. To this day, I never let go of that rosary. This next experience happened last year. My cousin and I have a tradition of staying up late every weekend watching horror movies. One night, after we finished a movie, he went to bed. His room is outside the main house, so once he left, I stayed alone in the living room.
I decided to watch something else because I wasn't sleepy yet. It was around 1 in the morning. About half an hour later, I started feeling exhausted. My eyes kept closing no matter how hard I tried to stay awake. Without realizing it, I fell asleep on the couch. Suddenly, I woke up startled. The first thing I noticed was that the TV was turned off. That immediately felt wrong, because I clearly remembered falling asleep with it on. I stood up and bent down to unplug it, but when I looked at the dark screen, I froze. In the reflection, standing in the kitchen behind me, was a tall figure. Very tall. Unnaturally thin. It was so tall I couldn't even see its face, only its body. It wore a white suit. Its skin was completely black. The moment I saw it, an unbearable pain exploded inside my head. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move.
Everything became worse when the figure slowly began walking toward the kitchen exit. I don't know where I found the strength, but suddenly I ran out of the house toward my cousin's room, pounding desperately on his door while constantly looking back over my shoulder. Just before he opened the door, I heard it. A laugh. Not a normal laugh. It was something horrible. A sound so disturbing that even my cousin heard it clearly. Once inside his room, we immediately called my mother and warned her not to leave her bedroom. The three of us spent the rest of the night praying in terror, afraid that whatever that thing was would return. The next day, none of us had slept at all. My mother called my grandmother and told her everything. Soon after, my grandmother arrived and ordered us outside while she blessed and cleansed the house.
I'm not going to lie to you. That experience destroyed me. I couldn't sleep properly for days afterward. Nothing like that has happened again, but I've never stayed alone in the house since then. And even now, I still wonder what that creature was, and what would have happened if I had remained frozen for 1 second longer. I don't want to imagine it.
Thank you for listening to my stories. I know they're somewhat short, but I tried my best to explain exactly how terrified I felt in those moments. And I want to leave one piece of advice for anyone listening. Never ignore your instincts. If you truly feel you're in danger, act immediately. And above all, don't stay alone awake late at night. You never know what might happen if you try acting brave.
My name is Ruby. This time, I want to share a paranormal experience that happened to me personally. When I was 5 years old, my family moved from my hometown to another city where my father's relatives lived. We moved into a house he had inherited from family members. Sometime later, when I was maybe 6 years old, my parents went out one night with my older brother. I stayed home asleep. When I woke up, I called for my parents, but nobody answered. That's when I realized they had gone out. Still sleepy, I sat on my bed. Back then, the house had a long hallway connecting the living room to the kitchen. My bedroom was on the left side of that hallway. There were no lights in the corridor, only the faint glow coming from the living room. I remember sitting there for several minutes, staring toward the hallway. Then I saw it. The shadow of an adult man. He had a thin build. At first, I only noticed the shadow on the floor because of the living room light, but it was moving.
Walking slowly toward my room. I honestly thought it was my dad. So I simply adjusted my blanket, turned around, and went back to sleep. The next day, I asked my father if he had come home alone during the night. His answer terrified me. "I didn't come back alone," he said. "I returned with your mother and brother." I told them what I saw, but of course nobody believed me. Still, I remember that shadow perfectly. I know what I saw. I'm 17 now. A few months ago, I visited one of my aunts and her daughters. We were talking about songs, movies, and random things, until the conversation turned toward paranormal experiences. When it was my turn, I told them about the shadow. Years after that incident, the house was remodeled, so it no longer looks the same as when I was 6. But my cousins told me that when they were younger, they also heard strange things in that house. According to them, the place was haunted because a man had died there years ago. When they told me that, everything suddenly made sense. Months later, I tried forgetting what I had seen, but I can't.
One night, I woke up because I suffer from insomnia. Suddenly, I felt someone yank my leg. I got scared, but I didn't scream or say anything because my parents still don't believe in paranormal things. I just forced myself to go back to sleep and tried once again to forget the shadow I had seen years earlier. But it didn't happen only once. It happened 3 more times. Another night, I even felt someone shake my hand. Thankfully, things have been calm recently. But honestly, I'm afraid it might happen again. Thanks for listening to my story. Maybe someday I'll find the courage to tell you about my other experiences.
My name is Ema. Ever since I was little, I've seen strange things inside my house. Moving shadows. Voices. At first, I believed it was just my imagination,
because I've always been sensitive to horror stories and scary things. But what I saw that day wasn't a shadow. I swear it was real. I was around 5 or 6 years old. I should explain that my family's kitchen has a large window facing both the backyard and the street. Across from the window, near the far end of the kitchen, there was a table. That day I was sitting there drawing with my back turned toward the window. My mom was in another room folding clothes while my dad was at work. I remember I was drawing a horse while watching some cartoon related to horses. But the entire time I felt like something was watching me. It was an awful feeling. At one point I thought maybe my mother was standing behind me, so I turned around. There was a man standing outside the window. But it wasn't a normal man. It wasn't human. Its skin was green and covered in scales. It was bald. Its eyes were yellow with black pupils. It looked like a reptile. I only saw it for maybe 10 seconds before I screamed at the top of my lungs. The creature immediately ducked out of sight below the window. I grabbed my mom's large scissors and ran toward the glass to look outside. Nothing was there anymore.
My mother came running and hugged me while I cried hysterically. I told her exactly what I had seen. Surprisingly, she believed me. She took me into the bedroom with her and immediately called my grandmother. My grandmother was the kind of woman people claimed had a connection with the spirit world. She read tarot cards and practiced things like that. After hearing the story, my grandmother told my mother that as I grew older, I would continue seeing things like that. Then she told her to bless the house. I was still completely in shock. I told my friends about the creature afterward, but none of them believed me. Only my mother's side of the family and my grandmother did. My father insisted it had all been my imagination, though sometimes I think that's simply what he wants to believe. But I know what I saw. And to this day, I've never seen that creature again. Honestly, I still don't know what it was, but I'm absolutely certain it was real. And to the people who have seen things like this, you're not alone. I have more experiences like this one. If you want, I'd be happy to share them. Greetings from Florida.